it has emboldened other governments to go even further.
He's such a coward. God, he's such a coward. This is the most like rent-seeking, profiteering, like spineless me, dude. Can you please explain what was so wrong about what Zuck said? So
the message is clear. Get rid of the fact checkers that Trump doesn't like. Reflect the tipping point of the win, as Zuckerberg called it. And remember, most voters use Facebook or Instagram. So these changes will shape the information, and whether it's fact-checked or not, that most people get in this coming era. It is telling and should be noted when powerful companies proclaim they are ditching fact-checking pursuant to a political agenda. Now, studies had shown the fact-checking that is being ditched, that I just showed you, and I'm going to show you more of what Zuckerberg says, it did work. It cut down on belief in falsehoods. Zuckerberg cites Elon Musk's X in his announcement, and he cites Trump. So this isn't one of those times where we have to sort of wonder, is it a coincidence and the timing? No, Zuckerberg is making it very clear what this is for.
Do you think he's directly responding to the threats that you have made to him in the past?
Probably. Yeah, probably.
Facebook acknowledged that when it came to misinformation going into 2016, it wasn't a million or two people. It was over 100 million Americans who were exposed to foreign election propaganda.
Calling women household objects now permitted on Facebook after Meta updated its guidelines. Meta on Tuesday announced sweeping changes to how it moderates content that will roll out in the coming months, including doing away with professional fact-checking. But the company also quietly updated its hateful conduct policy, adding new types of content users can post to the platform, effective immediately. Users are now allowed to, for example, refer to women as household objects or property, or transgender or non-binary people as it, according to a section of the policy prohibiting such speech that was crossed out. Apparently, the Zuck made a statement on this.
Hey everyone, I want to talk about something important today, because it's time to get back to our roots around free expression on Facebook and Instagram. I started building social media to give people a voice. I gave a speech at Georgetown 5 years ago about the importance of protecting free expression, and I still believe this today. But a lot has happened over the last several years. There's been widespread debate about potential harms from online content. Governments and legacy media have pushed to censor more and more. A lot of this is clearly political, but there's also a lot of legitimately bad stuff out there. Drugs, terrorism, child exploitation. These are things that we take very seriously, and I want to make sure that we handle responsibly.
Wait, what? Terrorism and child exploitation, very bad. Drugs? Is that really in the same class of thing there? Okay. Jesus Christ.
But there's also a lot of legitimately bad stuff out there. Drugs, terrorism, child exploitation. These are things that we take very seriously, and I want to make sure that we handle responsibly. So we built a lot of complex systems to moderate content. But the problem with complex systems is they make mistakes. Even if they accidentally censor just 1% of posts, that's millions of people. And we've reached a point where it's just too many mistakes and too much censorship. The recent elections also feel like a cultural tipping point towards once again prioritizing speech. So we're going to get back to our roots and focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our policies, and restoring free expression on our platforms. More specifically, here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to get rid of fact checkers and replace them with community notes, similar to X, starting in the US. After Trump first got elected,
Yeah, why would we have cringe fact checkers when we could brigade community note systems? Hell yes.
in 2016, the legacy media wrote nonstop about how misinformation was a threat to democracy. We tried in good faith to address those concerns without becoming the arbiters of truth. But the fact checkers have just been too politically biased and have destroyed more trust than they've created,
Examples?
especially in the US. So over the next couple of months, we're going to phase in a more comprehensive community notes system. Second, we're going to simplify our content policies and get rid of a bunch of restrictions on topics like immigration and gender that are just out of touch with mainstream discourse. What started as a movement to be more inclusive has increasingly been used to shut down opinions and shut out people with different ideas, and it's gone too far. So I want to make sure that people can share their beliefs and experiences on our platforms. Third, we're changing how we enforce our policies to reduce the mistakes that account for the vast majority of censorship on our platforms. We used to have filters that scanned for any policy violation. Now, we're going to focus those filters on tackling illegal and high-severity violations. And for lower-severity violations, we're going to rely on someone reporting an issue before we take action. The problem is that the filters make mistakes, and they take down a lot of content that they shouldn't. So by dialing them back, we're going to dramatically reduce the amount of censorship on our platforms. We're also going to tune our content filters to require much higher confidence before taking down content. The reality is that this is a trade-off. It means we're going to catch less bad stuff, but we'll also reduce the number of innocent people's posts and accounts that we accidentally take down. Fourth, we're bringing back civic content. For a while, the community asked to see less politics because it was making people stressed, so we stopped recommending these posts. But it feels like we're in a new era now, and we're starting to get feedback that people want to see this content again. So we're going
Thank God. I was worried because one time I clicked on a Jordan Peterson post on Facebook and I didn't get recommended 400 other casts with Joe Rogan and Eric and Brett Weinstein and all the other. Thank God now I can go down that hole. Yes.
to start phasing this back into Facebook, Instagram, and Threads while working to keep the communities friendly and positive. Fifth, we're going to move our trust and safety and content moderation teams out of California and our
What the fuck? Not the California moderation teams.
our trust and safety and content moderation teams out of California
Please say it to Austin, Texas. Please just say to Texas. Please say to Austin, Texas. Please, 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 please.
and our US-based content review is going to be based in Texas.
All right, I'm outie. I'll be back tomorrow. Have fun.
We're going to move our trust and safety and content moderation teams out of California, and our US-based content review is going to be based in Texas. As we work to promote free expression, I think that will help us build trust to do this work in places where there is less concern about the bias of our teams. Finally, we're going to work with President Trump to push back on governments around the world that are going after American companies and pushing to censor more. The US has the strongest constitutional protections for free expression in the world. Europe has an ever-increasing number of laws institutionalizing censorship and making it difficult to build anything innovative there.
What is the significance of moving to Texas? I don't really get it, but I'm definitely missing something. Austin and Texas is seen as like new MAGA, kind of. They represent like the cutting edge MAGA ideology that's also like cool and hip with all like the Austin podcasters and everything. And Texas is like, they're not just country. They're country with laptops. They're cowboys with computers. They're serious MAGA with iPhones and AirPods. It's just like that's just like what Texas has kind of become the symbol of, basically.
Latin American countries have secret courts that can order companies to quietly take things down.
You ever heard of a little thing called the Patriot Act? Or like, what do you mean? Like, what do we? I also really don't like. This is just my anti-American bias showing. I really don't like it when Americans like say Europe, like European countries, or like Latin America, or like. What do you give me some examples? Which country are you talking about? Because these countries are different. Which countries are you talking about? Give me an example of what you're talking about. Like,
For a while,
this is a thing for X a while back. Yes, I know. He's talking specifically about the reference is the was it Bolivia? Somebody went after Elon Musk on X for some particular thing. I don't remember what it was about, but it was asked. Oh, was it Brazil?
the community asked to see less politics because it was making people stressed. So we stopped recommending these posts. But it feels like we're in a new era now, and we're starting to get feedback that people want to see this content again. So we're going to start phasing this back into Facebook, Instagram, and Threads while working to keep the communities friendly and positive. Fifth, we're going to move our trust and safety and content moderation teams out of California, and our US-based content review is going to be based in Texas. As we work to promote free expression, I think that will help us build trust to do this work in places where there is less concern about the bias of our teams. Finally, we're going to work.
Like that's, oh, so if you just, so you can't have it. What is the implicit message there? Any team in California is just not trustworthy in tech anymore? Is that the implied bias?
This work in places where there is less concern about the bias of our teams. Finally, we're going to work with President Trump to push back on governments around the world that are going after American companies and pushing to censor more. The US has the strongest constitutional protections for free expression in the world. Europe has an ever-increasing number of laws institutionalizing censorship and making it difficult to build anything innovative there. Latin American countries have secret courts that can order companies to quietly take things down. China has censored apps from even working in the country. The only way that we can push back on this global trend is with the support of the US government. And that's why it's been so difficult over the past 4 years when even the US government has pushed for censorship. By going after us and other American companies, it has emboldened other governments to go even further.
He's such a coward. God, he's such a coward. This is the most like rent-seeking, profiteering, like spineless dude.
But now we have the opportunity to restore free expression, and I'm excited to take it. It'll take time to get this right, and these are complex systems. They're never going to be perfect. There's also a lot of illegal stuff that we still need to work very hard to remove. But the bottom line is that after years of having our content moderation work focused primarily on removing content, it is time to focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our systems, and getting back to our roots about giving people voice. I'm looking forward to this next chapter. Stay good out there, and more to come soon.
He hired Dana White to look over it. Yeah. You should watch Asmongold react to this. His flit on how he felt about Facebook changed with every word. Oh, I watched this. How far did I make it? I made it 12 minutes and I couldn't do it anymore. Can you please explain what was so wrong about what Zuck said? Yeah, so Zuckerberg, I guess maybe you just don't realize it if you're on the left or if you're not like super politically plugged in, but all of this messaging is like messaging for MAGA, basically. Like all of this messaging is basically saying like, I am going to be a loyal Trump subject. Like that's what this is for. So like,
I want to talk about something important today, because it's time to get back to our roots around free expression on Facebook and Instagram. I started building social media to give people a voice. I gave a speech at Georgetown 5 years ago about the importance of protecting free expression, and I still believe this today. But a lot has happened over the last several years. There's been widespread debate about potential harms from online content. Governments and legacy media have pushed to censor more and more. A lot of this is clearly political.
So governments and legacy media
Pushed to censor more and
have pushed to censor more and more. So this is an attack on the left mainstream media, and it's an attack on Biden's administration, right? And we know because of the Twitter files, right? Even though none of that actually proved any of that, but
more. A lot of this is clearly political. But there's also a lot of legitimate.
A lot of this is clearly political in nature, right? Remember, all of the censorship and everything done, none of it was done in good faith. None of it was done because people were trying to figure out, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. None of it was done because of any concept of reducing harm, even if misguided or incorrect. All of this was done just to be political in nature. That's it.
But there's also a lot of legitimately bad stuff out there. Drugs, terrorism, child exploitation.
I don't know how conspiratorial I want to be, but I'll go maximum conspiracy because at this point, these guys are all, it's literally a conspiracy. These people are all now working together, right? Drugs, terrorism, and child exploitation, all of these things just feel like virtue signaling to the right. They don't like drugs, obviously. Terrorism is spooky, obviously. Child exploitation is this huge, weird, conservative, obsessive talking point over illegal immigration. What was that stupid, the movie they made? Was it The Sound of Freedom? Is that what I'm thinking of?
These are things that we take very seriously, and I want to make sure that we handle responsibly. So we built a lot of complex systems to moderate content. But the problem with complex systems is they make mistakes. Even if they accidentally censor just 1% of posts, that's millions of people. And we've reached a point where it's just too many mistakes and too much censorship. The recent elections also feel like a cultural
too many mistakes and too much censorship. Notice how the explanation that he just gave there doesn't really qualify for the loaded censorship he's using. If you had a moderating thing that was making mistakes, would we call that censorship? Maybe in effect, but I don't think we would describe it as such. But this is the signaling of support that was censorship, political censorship, right?
Also feel like a cultural tipping point towards once again prioritizing speech. So we're going to get back to our roots and focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our policies, and restoring free expression on our platforms.
Free expression and freedom of speech is always the calling card for conservatives. When they say freedom of expression and freedom of speech, they just mean that they don't want to get banned no matter what. That's always the calling card for that.
Specifically, here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to get rid of fact checkers and replace them with community notes.
So fact checkers are seen as bad because the Trump administration lies so much, and because conservative and MAGA are kind of in a different world. All fact checkers are seen as being politically biased, right? They're all liberal, they're all crazy, they're all wacky. This is just nobody on the right likes fact checkers anymore. Community notes are based because Elon Musk did them on X. That's it.
Similar to X, starting in the US. After Trump first got elected in 2016, the legacy media wrote nonstop about how misinformation was a threat to democracy. We tried in good faith to address those concerns without becoming the arbiters of truth. But the fact checkers have just been too politically biased and have destroyed more trust than they've created, especially.
So common talking point. Okay, well, sure, maybe this is the Russian propaganda, right? Sure, maybe Trump does lie and the Republicans do lie sometimes, sure, but so does the left. The left lies. And how are we supposed to trust you when you guys have messed up? You guys have made mistakes. So it's destroying the trust. Remember, the trust is always destroyed by by somebody making a mistake, not by the other people who are obsessively talking about those mistakes over and 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 over again, right? It's always the framing always lives how conservatives basically want the framing to live.
And have destroyed more trust than they've created, especially in the US. So over the next couple of months, we're going to phase in a more comprehensive community notes system. Second, we're going to simplify our content policies and get rid of a bunch of restrictions on topics like immigration and gender that are just out of touch with mainstream discourse.
So get rid of restrictions on topics like immigration and gender that are out of touch with mainstream discourse. Is you can go back to being super anti-immigrant and make fun of trans people, because we realize that a lot of our users and a lot of conservatives want to do that, basically.
Just out of touch with mainstream discourse. What started as a movement to be more inclusive has increasingly been used to shut down opinions and shut out people with different ideas, and it's gone too far. So I want to make sure that people can share their beliefs and experiences on our platforms. Third, we're changing how we enforce our policies to reduce the mistakes that account for the vast majority of censorship on our platforms. We used to have filters that stand for any policy violation. Now we're going to focus those filters on tackling illegal and high severity violations. And for lower severity violations, we're going to rely on someone reporting an issue before we take action. The problem is that the filters make mistakes, and they take down a lot of content that they shouldn't. So by dialing them back, we're going to dramatically reduce the amount of censorship on our platforms.
This change isn't necessarily bad, I don't think. I don't think there's anything being signaled there.
We're also going to tune our content filters to require much higher confidence before taking down content.
Same.
The reality is that this is a trade-off. It means we're going to catch less bad stuff, but we'll also reduce the number of innocent people's posts and accounts that we accidentally take down. Fourth, we're bringing back civic content. For a while, the community asked to see less politics because it was making people stressed, so we stopped recommending these posts. But it feels like we're in a new era now, and we're starting to get feedback that people want to see this content again. So we're going to start phasing this back into Facebook, Instagram, and Threads while working to keep the communities friendly and positive. Fifth, we're going to move our trust and safety and content moderation teams out of California, and our US-based content review is going to be based in Texas.
So Texas is the new base place. It's where all the cool podcasts are. Austin is just like the new awesome conservative place to be. And California is woke and stupid and lame and trans and not good. So this is just a...
As we work to promote free expression, I think it will help us build trust to do this work in places where there's less concern about the bias of our teams.
Because if you're in California, you can't possibly be unbiased. You're going to be always like a crazy woke SJW cuck.
Finally, we're going to work with President Trump to push back on governments around the world that are going after American companies and pushing to censor more.
These are just companies that have been mean to Elon Musk. We're going to fight them alongside Trump to help defend our fellow billionaires in the United States.
The US has the strongest constitutional protections for free expression in the world. Europe has an ever-increasing number of laws institutionalizing censorship and making it difficult to build anything innovative there.
Europe is cringe. European restrictions on tech and what they did to Apple and the poor USB-C port and everything else is like cringe and evil and mean. And we need to fight back against the Europeans.
Latin American countries have secret courts that can order companies to quietly take things down. China has censored apps from even working in the country. The only way that we can push back on this global trend is with the support of the US government. And that's why it's been so difficult over the past 4 years when even the US government has pushed for censorship.
Remember, Biden bad, Democrats bad. The Democrats and Biden have pushed for censorship. Very bad, not good.
But going after us and other American companies,
No, going after us and going after other American companies. I don't even know what that means. How many people has Trump sued at this point?
it has emboldened other governments to go even further. But now we
Because the Biden administration was... I don't even know what they did, actually. I don't know what he could be referring to. Somehow companies in the United States censoring people on COVID or immigration, misinformation, or whatever, has emboldened other governments to take bad actions against
companies. It has emboldened other governments to go even further. But now we have the opportunity to restore free expression, and I'm excited to take it. It'll take time to get this right, and these are complex systems. They're never going to be perfect. There's also a lot of illegal stuff that we still need to work very hard to remove. But the bottom line is that after years of having our content moderation work focused primarily on removing content, it is time to focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our systems, and getting back to our roots about giving people voice. I'm looking forward to this next chapter. Stay good out there, and more to come soon.
Do you think he's legitimately MAGA or just trying to compete with X and being the based right platform? And it's probably just trying to get concessions from Trump and trying to get more crazy conservatives onto the platform, basically. But I mean, the effect is going to be the same regardless.
This is what they're like. I don't know if you've read my book or not, but this is what they're like.
I did, yeah.
This is exactly the way Mark always was. And he's like, I called him, he's kind of a sad weather vane. He just sort of tips and goes along depending on what's in his self-interest. And
do you think Piers might pivot to glazing Democrats now that Trump's president? Nope. It's just, he'll follow the online audiences, I would imagine. He's got a formula right now that he iterates on, and he's like successfully kind of like captured the whole like far right outrage machine. And so now they've reverse captured him, and it's just going to be like basically serving the slop back to them, like the entire media sphere does online.
This is what he is like. He's always found it irritating that he has to have responsibility for anything or consequences anywhere in the world, and doesn't consider himself a publisher. And so he'll do whatever it takes at whatever time it takes. So I find him disloyal to almost everyone, including back when he threw Trump off the platform. I just don't trust him with anything. And in 4 years' time, he'll switch again if it's in his best interests, financial interest. Really.
I mean, he wouldn't be the first media titan to go where the power and money wind blows. But on the detail of his statement yesterday, it was a pretty extraordinary reversal.
Well, it was also it was a little mendacious on a number of things. By the way, there are a lot of conservative fact checkers in that fact checking situation. And many years ago, he talked about how AI was going to solve this, and now it's community notes that's going to solve this. It's a multifaceted problem. And the real issue is the site is built for malevolent players, and sometimes governments, sometimes people, to do whatever it want on the system. It's a system that's impossible to fact check. It's a system that has no guardrails on it, and it's a system in which he uses the First Amendment when it suits him. I actually don't think he's read it, even though it's short and first. Governments shall make no law. Like, it doesn't say Facebook shall make no law. He makes rules and then he breaks them. And he says, with Alex Jones, he did that with all kinds of things. And then he reverses himself. Holocaust deniers was a good example. He told me in an interview, and we got, I was like, well, he said, Holocaust deniers don't mean to lie. And I said, well, that's kind of the definition of a Holocaust denier. But, and then 2 years later, reversed it. And then who knows if he's going to, now he seems to have reversed it again. And so I don't think he has any particular principles or values that are lasting. He can do whatever he wants because he's king of that.
Well, yeah, to a point, I guess he can. Dave Smith, what did you make of this?
He's king of that site. Piers, he can't be fired ever. His children can't be fired. Let me just be clear. He has total control of that site.
But you're talking to the wrong accent when it comes to kings. We like our king. We like
I know, you have a better king. I'd rather have Prince Charles running that thing.
We believe in monarchical power. So,
yes.
Dave Smith, I mean, I found it jaw-dropping, to be honest, notwithstanding a lot of what Cara just said, that she wasn't remotely surprised by the wind blowing. But to actually see him, trot down to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the Trump ring, as it was put, and to then do really what turned out to be half mea culpa and half screeching U-turn over pretty much everything that Facebook had stood for, was pretty spectacular to watch.
Yeah, it was incredible. And, I want to be clear. I think this is...
Always listen to how these guys that lied about being centrists, always listen to how they talk about like Trump and the mega stuff. It's always like, oh yeah, I'm so happy. Like, it's so strange that Did Dave Smith admit for the first time, was it next to me when he was cowarding the entire conversation? He was like, I think I have to support Donald Trump, to the surprise of literally nobody. Nobody is surprised about this.
Was pretty spectacular to watch.
Yeah, it was incredible, and I want to be clear. I think this is a really positive thing. I
do.
don't believe in so like I kind of want to be happy about it, but all of my instincts are just to rip the guy, because especially because he doesn't acknowledge there's no acknowledgement that he did something wrong or that he's changed his mind on this. It's kind of this just vague, like, oh, I created this to give people a voice, and a lot of people think this stuff went too far. And like, yes, it reminds me of I debated Chris Cuomo last year, and it reminds me of him coming out and saying like, hey, you guys, this ivermectin stuff isn't horse dewormer. It turns out it's people medicine, and you're like, yeah, that's what we were all saying at the time in my world, at least. And we got a lot of abuse for that. At one point, I do think it's worth just pointing out what happened over these years, even though I think there's a very positive change.
Now it's time for a disfactual accounting of history by Dave Smith, where we lie about every single thing, cite to absolutely nothing, and misrepresent the entire historical record. And by historical record, I mean within the last 8 years, in order to suck off Donald Trump again. Oh boy. Also, the whole reason why Zuckerberg doesn't want to take accountability is because the messaging right now isn't so much that the media companies have messed up, or at least the alternative media companies messed up. The messaging is that it was Biden's fault. Biden was the one doing it. That's why Zuckerberg doesn't want to take accountability. Because if Zuckerberg takes accountability, then it takes away some of the accountability from the Democrats. The message can't be that Twitter or Facebook made mistakes. The message is the FBI and the DOJ made them do it.
I was just playing on my show the other day, a video clip. I'm sure all of you guys have seen it. But Mark Zuckerberg blatantly admitted that both Facebook and the FBI interfered in the 2020 election on the Joe Rogan Experience. And, for all of the news coverage, and to some degree, rightfully so.
Post the evidence. Again, remember also, like detailed reports from the FBI, from the DOJ, from investigations, from studies. None of these things matter. It's all fake news. The studies that show that right-wing information was amplified on platforms doesn't matter. Fake news. Leaked emails. None of these things matter. None of these things matter. But if the CEO of the company, who also, by the way, stands to gain a whole bunch by saying the things he's about to say, comes out and sides with the current administration, and then the current popular move towards that administration, crazy that he would come out and say these things. But there's we don't even stop for 1 microsecond to second guess his motivations or anything. It's astounding to me. That's astounding to me.
So over the last 4 years, about January 6th, about some of Trump's claims of the election that him and his lawyers were really never able to demonstrate at all. But how about that admission that the FBI came and told Facebook, be prepared for a Russian dump that's coming soon. And then when the laptop came, you have 50 plus intelligence officers signing on to this letter saying that this is the Russian disinformation. And he admitted to censoring people for that. This is blatant.
Just remember that letter that was publicly published, right? That was after companies like Twitter had already put the laptop story back online. The 50 letters or whatever, the 50 whatever people sent a letter, that didn't come before, that came after the laptop story. But
election interference by the FBI and one of the biggest tech companies out there. I mean, I would think if you're going to reverse that, it would also come along with an apology and some admission of what you were a part of.
Just nothing he said. There's not a shred of evidence for any of this other than Zuckerberg going out and cucking himself out with these public statements now. But no evidence, nothing leaked, nothing published by Zuckerberg, who would have access, by the way, to all of these emails, to all of this. Zuckerberg could very easily publish any of this information, I would imagine, or at least reference it. But it's always just this vague bullshit that MAGA sloppers like Dave Smith love to.
He says he created the site to give people a voice. You robbed your fellow Americans of their voice in a very important, crucial point in American history.
Yeah, look, I was a New York Post columnist at the time that all went down with their exclusive on Hunter Biden's laptop, which turned out to be a completely genuine story and certainly wasn't rushed.
We're going to hear this Hunter Biden laptop genuine story. Do you think in a single time in this entire thing, they're going to bring up the fact that the Burisma investigation started because of this guy, this informant who lied about everything involving Burisma? Because this came out not even a month ago. Alexander Smirnov entered his plea to a felony charge in connection with the bogus story, which was about the phony bribery scheme involving President Joe Biden and his son Hunter that became central to the Republican impeachment inquiry in Congress. But this is what kicked off the whole Burisma stuff. It was all built on a lie. But we all knew that because the Republicans investigated this for the better part of the last decade and found nothing. That's why there are no charges. That's why we only have these weird tax things. There's nothing. But I hope we don't bring that up a single time here.
Russian disinformation. And the way that all played out was quite extraordinary and pretty terrifying to see that the New York Post.
Although, guys, come on. Look, tech companies make mistakes the way publishing companies make
But that wasn't a
mistakes.
mistake, Cara, was it? I mean, it wasn't a mistake. They actually, hang on. Hang on, my point. They actually banned the New York Post X account completely.
Yes, they did.
If they didn't take down their.
Do you think that he's going to bring up that it was for less than 24 hours, the timeline? Do you think that'll ever be brought up? It won't. People were saying this woman is crazy. I don't know anything about this woman. I don't think I disagree with anything she's actually said so far. I didn't disagree with any of her opening, but I can't tell if she's slanted in one way or another, but I don't think I disagree with anything. But yeah, remember, no mistakes. Everything is done intentionally. Everything is done malevolently. Everything is evil. All of this is, yeah.
A true story. I mean, that is the most blatant attack on free speech I've ever seen.
But it's not free speech. It's not a government institution. Companies do that. Disney didn't put out a movie in China because the Chinese
They have the counter for this. Piers is going to try to say it doesn't matter here, but either Dave or Tim is going to come to his rescue and come to Trump's rescue and say, actually, sorry, it was government interference because the only reason they did it is because the FBI threatened them implicitly to do so. One of these guys will save Piers here and saying,
make it right though, doesn't it?
Of course not, but it's not, you're equating Facebook. You're equating Facebook or Twitter with the government. It is not a public square.
No, I'm not.
It certainly was not. Listen, I was not equating Facebook and the FBI, and I think it is reasonable to point out that a lot of these big tech companies were under duress really since Donald Trump won in 2016. All the heads were hauled in front of Congress and threatened up and down if they didn't get this misinformation problem under control. But is the claim here that those intelligence officers made a mistake and really thought this was Russian disinformation and then realized it was Hunter Biden's laptop?
like, again, this is the normalization of the crazy. Imagine like what he's just said, he's just turned on its head. Like what happened, right? Imagine somebody looks at my Snap map, okay? And they see that I was in Omaha, Nebraska. And then they see that I was in New York City the same day. And they look at you and they're like, okay, well, we see how far Steven moved. He teleported. And the other person's like, no, he probably flew in a plane. And the guy's like, are you going to tell me that thousands of pounds of aluminum and engines overcame gravity and flew through the sky? It's like his statement here. Are you going to tell me that all of these people working in intelligence thought that there was a chance that Donald Trump, the guy who had publicly already glazed Putin, had already publicly called for Hillary's 10,000 emails to be released, who had people in his cabinet, or not cabinet, I'm sorry, his what do you call it? Campaign election team. People like Roger Stone that were literally working alongside Russian operatives. You're going to tell me that these people genuinely thought there could be some kind of Russian interference and not instead my theory, which is way more believable, that all of the intelligence agencies were in cahoots with each other and they were all working in a malicious way. Now, keep in mind that not only does his story have zero evidence, there's evidence for the other story that literally came out from people who were pro-Trump, right? The Durham report, I think, is the one I referenced. It dug through the FBI, found like, yeah, there's probably kind of like political bias here and there needs to be more checking on stuff. That was like the scathing review. Not that people were maliciously working to lie against the Trump administration, right? Like, but his story somehow gets to be presented here as like, oh, you're going to tell me that these people made a mistake? Oh, and it's not obvious that there was a massive, huge global conspiracy top down through all of our federal government and all of the social medias and all of the like,
that those intelligence officers made a mistake and really thought this was Russian disinformation.
And also, how dare you cowardly little spineless cuckworm? How are you going to sit here and say that? How are you going to sit here and say there was this grand conspiracy and then not implicate Trump at all? You're going to tell me this conspiracy was so huge and so grand and involved all of our intelligence agencies and involved all the different like line members and all the heads of these agencies, but the head of the FBI? Donald Trump, if you go far up enough, right, didn't know? How is this conspiracy so grand, but it just stopped right there, right at the head of the FBI? How? What? Like, we're not going to think for a second about it? Because you better believe that if it was Biden or if it was Harris or if it was Clinton or if it was Obama, that he would have been personally involved directing all of this, right? Like, hello?
Is our government,
Hunter Biden's laptop?
Our government should be talking. Go ahead.
Tim, no, let Cara finish up, and then I'll bring you in, Tim.
The government should constantly be talking to lots of companies because there are disinformation campaigns from Iran.
Okay, never mind. I don't know who this lady is. She's about to get bullied like crazy on this panel. I hate that, like, this goes back to the normalization thing. It feels like if I were to give this opinion, I've already lost 80% of the audience. I've probably lost 20% of the audience on my services. But like, any reasonably intelligent person would say, social media companies are massive. They have huge power in the United States. Of course, there should obviously be some communication back and forth between our intelligence agencies and these massive social media companies. That's obviously true. But that feels like an opinion that you wouldn't even be able to fight for. Like people would just automatically already, like there's nothing you could say to convince somebody else. Like that's such an obviously true thing.
Bring you in, Tim.
The government should constantly be talking to lots of companies because there are disinformation campaigns from Iran, Russia. You can't pretend that China's not all up in our grip.
Like, look at these guys laughing. They don't believe the disinformation from foreign actors. Excuse me. Let me introduce you to a well-known disinformationer, Leah Thomas. These are the real threats. Okay. Have you seen the drag queens at the local library? Like, look at them laugh. Foreign enemies, foreign interference. Sorry. Only USA does that. Now, you notice that Dave Smith here is laughing and Tim Pool's not. That's because Dave Smith is still on the Kremlin payroll. He hasn't gotten busted yet for whatever foreign bullshit ass money that he hasn't been caught with yet. And Tim Pool has. So it's not as funny for him. But Dave still thinks this is all like really fucking hilarious because his foreign owners are still supporting everything he says.
To lots of companies because there are disinformation campaigns from Iran, Russia. You can't pretend that China's not all up in our grill. You just can't. You just can't. And there should be discussions between government and companies. They're going to occur. By the way, they've been.
Let's see. And then how does Dave Smith talk out of this? Because I don't think he'll ever directly say he has one of two. He's got one of two chairs that he can sit in basically while he watches his own country getting asked by Donald Trump. He can either sit in the chair and hold up the sign that says, well, America does it worse, or he can sit in the other chair. Oh no, there's two chairs in the first chair. It's America does it worse, or America does it to itself worse than anybody else does it. And then the other chair is maybe they interfere, but everybody does, and it's not a big deal. These are one of the two chairs that he wants to crawl towards right now. Let's see.
Been occurring since the beginning of time, way back on. Go watch Oppenheimer. There's discussions happening all the time on all levels between companies. The question is, what is pressure and what is important discussions that these companies, because they are the nexus of all these information systems.
Oh my God. One of the biggest complaints that I have with conspiracy theories is that it takes away oxygen from real conversations, okay? I don't know if I would agree with her on everything or not, but what she just said, and it sucks because this is an important conversation. What does count as pressure, right? And there are legitimate questions to ask. If the FBI sends you a message and they say, hey, there might be some issues with this, and you know that the current administration might feel a way about a thing, and you know that that information seems to align with that, and you've got decisions to make, that's a good question. What does count as pressure? What should that communication look like? What should the accountability mechanisms be? These are really good questions. But we're not going to spend any time on this show talking about that. Everything she's saying right now is wasted because it's going to be mixed in with the MAGA slop. And the problem is that having a conversation with the MAGA slop involved is like adding diarrhea to a mixer of the best like milkshake you could ever make in the world. It doesn't matter. It's just going to taste like shit.
Should be having, and what are the guardrails against government overreaching? I am all for stopping government overreach. I did a great interview with Edward Snowden about this issue. Perhaps the way he did it wasn't right, but what the government was doing was wrong. They fixed it. There should be guardrails around these things. The question is how it's done. But what happens is there's a fever dream on the left and a fever dream on the right of what's occurring, and it's a little less nefarious. I think that Facebook, unfortunately, occupies a far too important role in news distribution as a kind of a monopoly. And that's the problem we have going forward. It's a private company that's determining what everybody sees. And they're going to not just make mistakes. We're at the behest of Mark Zuckerberg's obviously incompetent ability to decide what's right and wrong. And
Okay.
why should he?
Let me bring Tim in. You've been waiting patiently. Tim, your response.
Free speech is a principle. When we say that Facebook...
Tim has no principles.
Tim Pool defends Destiny's ban.
Crazy. The free speech advocate?
There's no way. This must be taken out of... This is the part where they try to manipulate you for being a good person into letting evil succeed.
Huh. Weird. I thought he was a free speech absolutist.
Well, not if you're evil.
Oh,
You have
true.
to suppress Satan.
And who decides if you're evil? Tim Pool does.
Tim Pool.
Absolutely based. Tim doesn't understand anything about free speech. I'm not even convinced that he's an American citizen. I don't know if these guys are all like fucking salt or whatever. What's that? Where they're like children that are like bred in other countries and then they end up being swapped out for American citizens as like secret like sleeper agents or whatever. They always show themselves. They always tell on themselves too. As soon as they start bringing up like the First Amendment or bringing up like freedom of speech, like these people have no concept of anything about the country or America or freedom of speech or anything. These are like sleeper agents against the Republic.
Let me bring Tim in. You've been waiting patiently. Tim, your response.
Free speech is a principle. When we say that Facebook, X, Twitter, whatever platform is silencing free speech, we are not talking about the First Amendment. The First Amendment protects multiple rights, of which one of those is free speech. So this constant conflation of a private company isn't violating your First Amendment. I'm not going to bring up the First Amendment. I'm going to go on a platform, I'm going to express my ideas and share news, and if they silence me, they are violating my free speech. Now,
like in response to that, she should just start screeching at the top of her lungs. Just scream. She should just be screaming. And she should do it until they mute her mic. And then when they unmute her mic, she should say, was he just attacking my freedom of speech? Is this good freedom of speech? Is that what you mean when you say freedom of speech? That every single person has an equal right to every single platform to say every single thing they want at every single point in time? Or
more importantly, this argument about, you mentioned there's a fever dream on the left and the right. I want to make one thing clear. Mark Zuckerberg coming out and saying that now we're going to have more free speech or whatever it is he's trying to say. This is not a pendulum swing. This is not the weather vane. Certainly, I do believe the man is just bending the knee to whatever power structure he sees. But if we were actually going to see a pendulum swing in the other direction, they would keep the fact-checking program, ban the liberal news outlets, and only allow conservative outlets to fact-check posts on Facebook. When you look at all sides, when you look at ground news, the majority of U.S. fact-checkers had a liberal bias, and only one, which was associated with Daily Caller, was considered to be conservative-leaning.
so this is just like the standard 75 IQ or Russian agent talking point that most of the fact checkers lean left. Well, what if one side is lying more than the other? I mean, what do you do then?
And when numerous outlets on the right made attempts to get access through Pointer to the fact-checking system, they were denied.